Gute Woche. We're going to begin the Farbrengen this afternoon. This Shabbos is a Shabbos that has to do with Shlichus, with Shluchim. Because this Shabbos, the international convention of the Rebbe Shluchim of all over the world is taking place. So this is the Shabbos that has to do with Shluchim. And based on the vote of the Alter Rebbe, Amadaf Leben mit der Zeit, we have to live with the times, and as it's interpreted, that it means to relate to Pashas HaShavua. In this week's Chazarah, we find strong emphasis on the concept of Shlichus. Because Avram sent Eliezer to find the Shidduch for Yitzchak. Eliezer was a Shliach of Avram. And as Chazal bring to our attention that the Shlichus of Eliezer is repeated more than once in Chumash. It's repeated 2 or 3 times in this week's Chazarah. So we see the importance of the Shlichus. And to such an extent that it becomes, in Torah, it becomes, as the Rebbe used the expression, it becomes kavua, which means permanent. This concept of kavua relates, in halacha we know there's a concept of bittul, which means when one item gets mixed in with another. We learn in Yeridea there's a concept of milk and dairy being bottled. When there's 60 times as much, or sometimes there's a concept of one thing being bottled with the other when one is a majority, one is a minority. However, the halacha in Shulchan Aruch is that when something is kavua, when something is permanent, it can never become bottled. It always remains there. No matter how much we will bring in again, multiply it by how much we will multiply it, it still remains there and it cannot become bottled. And here, like Rebbe mentions, but when we're talking about Yidden Bichlal, Yidden never become bottled. Why? When is there a concept of bittul that we take in consideration what is more and what is less? That is when things intermingle, when things mix in. Yidden do not mix with Goyim. Yidden, as the selected nation that the Rebbe has chosen, Ata v'chartonu mikol ha'amim, they have chosen us from all nations. And mainly Yidden, though we are ma'at mikol ha'amim, when it comes to numbers we are the least of all nations, but still we will never become bottled because Yidden never get mixed in, never get into it. It never gets mixed in, so that a question of bittul should arise. But getting back to our inyan, back to our Chazarah, and back to the concept of Shlichus, that this is the Chazarah and this is the week of Shlichus. And this is the Shabbos that the convention of Shluchim is taking place. And the whole idea of a convention, a kinus, is that it brings together people, brings together Shluchim from all over the world, so that it creates an achdus, a unity amongst the Shluchim. And that's the whole idea of the kinus, to create an achdus. Especially, where is the kinus taking place? It's taking place in the Beis HaKnesses, in a shul. What's the whole idea of a shul is also Beis HaKnesses. Let us touch up the word. It brings together. It's also Maloshin Kinus, Maloshin uniting. That's the whole idea of a shul. And especially this shul here, that it is not only a Beis HaKnesses, it is also a Beis HaMedrash, where Torah is learned. And where Torah is learned, it also brings together those that learn Torah. It also creates achdus. And not only is it a Beis HaKnesses, and not only is it a Beis HaMedrash, but it's also a bias of tzedakah, a bias of gemilas chesed, and this is where this kinus is taking place. So definitely that the whole idea of the kinus is to lead and to increase to the concept of avas Yisrael and achdus Yisrael and total unity amongst all those participating in the kinus, and bichlal, to bring achdus into the world. And this kinus is called a kinus oilami. In other words, it's the participants in the convention are shluchim from all over the world. Though there are various differences from various parts of the world, when we say oilam, when we say welt, it right away indicates on various differences, and differences from one place to another, and time, difference in time, and difference in place, and so forth. But nonetheless, here we say kinus oilami. It's one kinus that's bringing together people from all over. And when one kinus brings together people from all over, what's the idea of this kinus? Naturally, to create achdus, to create an avos Yisrael and an achdus Yisrael. This is what the kinus stands for. Here I refer to what Alter Rebbe inserted into the Siddur, and anything which is mentioned in the Siddur is something which is equivalent to everybody. It's a davar hashava l'chol nefesh. And the Alter Rebbe says that how is a Yid supposed to begin davening? Before davening, we're supposed to say, Arini mekabel alai mitzvahs asei shel v'ahavta l'reyacho kamoich. In other words, the concept of Yidden being totally united. This is what comes as a hachana, as a hakdama prior to davening. And this is what we find also by Moshe Rabbeinu. We find that before Moshe Rabbeinu was nifta, Moshe Rabbeinu, who was Bechir HaNivroim, he was the chosen of all those created. And before Yidden were about to enter Eretz Yisrael, what did Moshe Rabbeinu do? He was in charge of Milchemes Midyan. What's the idea of Milchemes Midyan? So here it's explained in the Chassidus at length. There's a famous Kunteres from the Rebbe Rashab, whose birthday was last Shabbos, called Kunteres Heicholzu. It's a pasuk, Heicholzu me'itchem anoshim, select amongst you people that should go and take part in Milchemes Midyan. So Chassidus teaches, what is the idea of Milchemes Midyan? Midyan means Meloshon Modoin umeiriva, to fight, to quarrel. And what is the concept of Milchemes Midyan? Before Yidden entered Eretz Yisrael, there was a need, there was a call that this idea of Modoin umeriva, the idea of machloikis, the idea of hatred from one another, this had to be totally abolished. This cannot exist before Yidden entered Eretz Yisrael. And this was Moshe Rabbeinu's task, which Moshe took care of before he left this world, was to make sure to be in charge of Milchemes Midyan. In other words, to wipe out any union of sinah, any union of Modoin umeriva, any union of hatred, which is going on amongst Yidden, that this should not exist, this should be wiped out. Especially when we're talking about shluchim. What's the idea of a shliach? Rabbi brought out that the emes is that every Yid is a shliach. Every Yid is a shliach of the Rebishter. Every person came down into this world to fulfill the mission of Lasis Lo Yisborech Dira B'Tachtonim, to make this world for a Dira for the Rebishter, a dwelling place for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and this is the shlichus, this is the mission that each and every Jew has. Especially when we're talking about those who are involved in the union of shlichus. When we're talking about shlichus, what's the union of shliach? Rabbi says that shliach plus 10 equals Mashiach, which means that when the shliach is involved in his work, and in what way is he involved in his work, that he puts all of his eser koiches hanefesh, all of the 10 koiches that he possesses are totally dedicated and involved in his work of shlichus, then he brings the world to the level of Mashiach. What's the union of Mashiach? The union of Mashiach is that is the pnimius, that is the in-depth of the world, the pnimius of the world. As Chassidus refers to it, the level of Yechida. We know there are 5 levels. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chai, Yechida. The highest level is Yechida. The level of Yechida, that is revealed in the world. In other words, by Shliach being involved in his work in a form that it's with a total dedication, with all the Esa, Koiches, HaNefesh, that is when he's preparing the world, that the world should be ready for Mashiach. That's the pshat, revealing the Mashiach that's in the world. What's meant us? The pnimius of the world. What's the whole idea is Mashiach will come. That is when the pnimius of the world will be revealed. By his avodah now, by the avodah of shluchim now, he's revealing this part in the world. In other words, making the world ready for the coming of Mashiach. And especially that we are now in the Shabbos, that from this Shabbos we bench the month of Kislev. And regarding the month of Kislev, we know Kislev is the 3rd of months from Tishrei. Just like Sivim is the 3rd of months from Nisan. And in Sivim we had Matan Torah. We know that the 3rd month, that is when we had Matan Torah. But the 3rd month from Nisan, that was the Matan Torah for Nigla Torah. The Matan Torah for Pnimis HaTorah, the Matan Torah for Chassidus, that is in the month of Kislev, which is the 3rd from Tishrei, and this is the month which we are entering now, because in this month we have the day of Yutes Kislev. And what's the inyan bechlal of Chassidus? So we know that it's explained that there are various levels in Torah, and Torah Chassidus Pnimis HaTorah is compared to the level of shemen, of oil. That is what Pnimis HaTorah stands for. What is the inyan of shemen? Chassidus brings out that shemen has this specialty, that when cook something with shemen, the expression goes, it is mifafeya bikuloi. It penetrates into the entire meichel, into the entire food that is cooked with the shemen. And when we're talking in Ruchnius, it's the same idea. When a Yid learns Chassidus has this effect on the person that it is mifafeya bikuloi. It's nemtim durch, it permeates the entire person. It has an effect on the entire person. That's the idea of shemen. That's the Indian of Chassidus, of Pnimis HaTorah, which is compared to shemen. And just like shemen in Gashmias has an effect on the entire dish, on the entire meichel, which is cooked, fried or boiled with the shemen. The same idea when we're talking in Ruchnius, and we are also entering Parshas Toldos. Toldos begins Eila Toldos. This is the Toldos of Avram, is that Avram gave birth to Yitzchak. Eila Toldos Yitzchak ben Avram Heiledes Yitzchak. We know what are the Toldos of Tzadikim. The Toldos of Tzadikim are Maisim Tovim. And what's the pshat? Avram Heiledes Yitzchak. So Chazal bring out that Avram Heiledes Yitzchak, that anybody that looked on Yitzchak saw the cluster ponim shel Avram. Avram resembled Yitzchak completely. Maybe the same thing. What's the pshat in Ruchnius? Toldos of tzaddikim is maisim tovim. In other words, the maisim tovim, the fruits, the good work that is accomplished, can be identified where it originated from, where it came from, and that's the inyan of the Toldoseim shel tzaddikim, and that it can be noticed that who does it come from? It comes from Avram. Say when we're talking about Avram, say when we're talking about Yitzchak, or when we're talking about Yankov, we refer to all of them as Avinu, as they are all our patriarchs, they are all our fathers. As it's explained in Chassidus, in Koiran Avis Ela Shloisha, it's only to these three that we refer to as Avis. To others, the other great tzaddikim, still we do not refer to them as Avis. Why? Because it's what's the pshat in Av? Av is a father. They are fathers to each and every Yid. A father relates and inherits two children. Memele, it's the Avodah of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yankov. This is übergegangen, and this went over to us Yidden, that we got strength for our Avodah. Each and every Yid relates to each of the others, to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yankov. The Rebbe continued in the Farbrengen. Sorry, before we go weiter, another union which the Rebbe brought out in conjunction how we're talking about a shliach working with all of his esa koiches hanefesh. That means the entire person, all the koiches that he has are dedicated to his work. Same when we're talking in this week's Sedra. This is the Sedra of Chayei Sarah. And Chayei Sarah lived 127 years. Meya Shana, Esrim Shana, V'Sheva Shana. So what does Rashi comment? Kulan Shavin L'Toiva. Even though it's mentioned Shana between Meya Shana, Esrim Shana, Sheva Shanim, still they are all equal to the good. So Chassidus has explained at length what's the inyan of Meya and Esrim and Sheva. Sheva relates to Midos. We know Chassidus explains us that there are 7 Midos in the person. Esrim relates to Moichin, to the Chochmah Bina Das of a person. And what does Meya relate? Meya relates to the Ratzon, to the power of desire, of Ratzon, which each and every person has. And here we say that all of these Madregas in Sarah, the Ratzon, the Moichin, and the Midas, they were all united, Kulan Shavin L'Toiva. Same when we're talking in Ruchnius, the lesson which we are deriving from this week's Sadra, it also has to be in such a way that everything that the person possesses, his entire being, all of his milas, sai his rotzen, sai his moichen, and sai his midis, all have to be totally united and dedicated to serve the Rebbe. In the Farbrengen later, the Rebbe continued that these days we are celebrating the Siyum HaRambam. Sai is Siyum for those who have learned 3 prakim a day, as well as a siyum for those who have learned 1 perik a day. And we know there is the concept of Beroiv Om Hadras Melech, that more people participate, adds glory to the Melech. So in other words, even though there is a Roiv Am already, there are already many people that are participating, nonetheless, by each and every person that is participating in the Siyum HaRambam, each and every one adds to the Hadras Melech, adds to the glory of the Melech. And naturally, when we're talking about Melech, whom do we mean Melech? Malkei Shalaylam, the Rabbeinu Shalaylam. And especially when people not only come themselves and participate themselves in the Siyam HaRambam, but when they also utilize their influence on others and bring other people to participate in the Siyam HaRambam. And here the Rebbe says not to get involved in any type of debates with other people, any type of ikuchim, but just to ask them and request from them to come to the Siyam HaRambam. And when they come to the Siyam HaRambam, then they will automatically be awakened. The Hisayrus from the Siyum will also affect them, and then there will be no longer any need for any type of ikuchim, for any type of debates. And the Rebbe stressed very strongly the importance of seeing to it that everybody participates in the Siyam HaRambam, because each and every person, each yochid, each individual, every single person that participates in the Siyam HaRambam adds to the Roiv Om Hadras Melech, adds to the glory of the Melech for the Malkei Shalaylam, the more people that participate, and especially that there will be Rabbanim and Gedolei Yisrael and Askonim, Chsidim and Shemaise, as we know the greatness of an Oisik B'tzorch Tzibah, somebody who's involved in communal work. The Alter Rebbe in Shulchan Aruch tells us the greatness of such a person, how great he is, and all of these people will be participating in the Siyam HaRambam. So by everybody that is also participating in the Siyam HaRambam, this is adding to the glory, to the Hadras Melech. He's adding to the Roivam, because by each and every one more person there is more Roivam, there are more people participating there, and Memele, the Hadras Melech is a greater one. And when we're talking about the greatness of an Indian of a Siyam HaRambam, what's the great mile of the Rambam? The mile of the Rambam is that he brought out all the halachas in a clear and precise language, that we can understand every halacha clearly, and everything we can understand clear from the way the Rambam wrote his Sefer. So this also relates to the concept of Rabbanim. What's the inyan of a Rav? A Rav's inyan is also to pasken shaylos. A Rav has to pasken halachas. Dvar Hashem zu halacha. And he has to bring it out in a clear and a precise way. And when a Rav brings out a psak halacha in a clear way, and he relates it b'darkei noyam or b'darkei shalom in a peaceful way, in a peaceful manner, this is the Dvar Hashem. These are the words of Hashem, which is the halacha. The halacha l'poil. The Rebbe says there, nobody has the right. Nobody has the right to criticize balabatim. In other words, do not have any right to criticize rabbanim. Do not have any right to tell rabbanim what they have to do. Even though a Rav at times also has to do tshuva, but nonetheless, when it comes from balabatim, it is the biggest chutzpah from a balabas to tell a Rav what he has to do. And what's the inyan of a rabbanim? The rabbanim are those that bring the words of Hashem to us, and we have to follow their piskei dinim, their psak halacha, which is related regarding halacha l'maaseh to each and every one of us. The very end of the Rambam, the Siyam HaRambam, the Rambam brings the pasuk. The Rambam describes what the world will be like when Mashiach will come, and there he brings the pasuk, Umallah ha'aretz deyas Hashem, that when Mashiach will come, the world will become full of wisdom as Hashem, knowing of Hashem, kamayim layom mechasim, just like water covers the yam. This is the very, very last halach in the Rambam. In Hilchas, first the Rambam ends off with Hilchas Malachim, then we have the two prokim that talk about Mashiach, which is Hilchas Mashiach, and this is what the Rambam concludes with. If we look into the Rambam in Hilchas Tshuva, we will find the Rambam there also talks about a person doing tshuva and what level a person will reach to by doing tshuva, and the Rambam brings the pasuk Umallah ha'aretz deyas Hashem, and does not bring the words kamayim layom mechasim. So that we know in the Rambam every word is accurate. So the question arises, if he's bringing the pasuk of Umallah ha'aretz deyas Hashem, why when he brings it in Hilchos Shuvah he does not bring the words kamayim layom mechasim? And why when he brings it in Hilchos Malachim he brings the entire pasuk Umallah ha'aretz deyas Hashem kamayim layom mechasim? And here the Rebbe brought out, when the Rambam talks in the Hilchos Shuvah, The Rambam is talking about a person doing tshuva. And when we're talking about tshuva, there are various levels in tshuva. Madreges, higher madreges, yet higher madreges. Especially as the Alter Rebbe tells us in Tanya, Ikar tshuva is believed, the main part of tshuva is in the heart. And so there are various levels in tshuva. What's the taich kamayim layom mechasim? Molor is there, Hashem. Then the pasuk concludes kamayim layom mechasim. Just like mayim, just like water covers the yam. That means that a person will reach to such a level, just like we cannot see the yam. Why can't we see the yam? Because the water is covering it. The same thing, he will come to such a level that his entire mitzias, his entire being, his entire existence will not be felt. Why? Because he will be in a total level of bittul. He will be in a total level of ibegegebenkeit. His yesh, his mitzias is not being felt. So when we're talking in Hilchas Tshuva, in Hilchas Tshuva there's the person who's doing tshuva. So there must be somebody doing tshuva. There must be a mitzias of a person doing tshuva. How high of a level he's up to. But as we mentioned in tshuva there are taka levels. But still, there is the person who is doing the tshuva. So there is the feeling of the yesh. So we cannot stress kamayim layom mechasim. Or we could say that he's reaching to a level of a malach it's deyos Hashem. However, when we're coming in the madrega of Mashiach, that is already the highest madrega of revelation of Getlichkeit which is going to be in the world. There Yidden are going to reach to such a level that their mitzias will not be felt. Their yesh will not be in existence. Just like mayim layom mechasim, just like water covers the yam and the yam is not seen, the same thing, the mitzias of a person will not be felt. Why? Because he's not his mitzias. His mitzias is totally dedicated to Getlichkeit. The same idea corresponds to the beginning of the Rambam. What does the Rambam begin his sefer with? Yisoida yisoidos, v'amuda chochmos. It's a foundation. Yisoida yisoidos is the foundation of foundations and the pillar of wisdom to know of the existence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that everything which HaKadosh Baruch Hu created, everything that is created, is ma'amitis himotzoi, comes from the truth of his existence. In other words, everything comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's the same concept. The concept of bittul, nothing is its own. Everything is coming from the Eibishter. Here talking on this inyan, how everyone is to know, and this is the foundation of foundations, the pillar of wisdom. Everybody is to know that everything was from the Eibishter. So in the Rambam there's the expression leida. We have to know that there's an existence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rebbe says there are various girses. There are, what it's in the Sefer HaMitzvahs of the Rambam, it's mentioned not leida, but lahamin, to believe. In other words, the question, is it something which a person understands, that everything comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or is it that he believes that everything comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu? So Rebbe says, so there's questions which is discussed in Sfarah, and what's the pshat? We tell a person that there is a mitzvah to believe. How can we command somebody to believe? Believing is something which a person has to reach to this level on his own. He has to believe. How can there be a tzivui on believing? Or furthermore, as stressed and see this many times, when we're saying that there is a tzivui on believing, and he knows that there is a commandment on believing, so automatically he's believing, because this commandment comes from a commander, so there has to be a belief in the commander. Otherwise, what shaykhs do we have to the mitzvah? So what's the pshat? There's a mitzvah lahamin. As soon as we say that there's a mitzvah, so automatically he's a maimin. But the accepted version, as it is in the Rambam, is the way we have it, that the expression is leida, that everybody has to know that there's an existence of the Eibishter and that everything in this world comes from the Eibishter. Earlier in the Farbrengen, when the Rebbe was talking about the concept of shliches, this is something which Torah has introduced, this koyach, that one person does something, and what he does is related to the person that has sent him. And there are various interpretations in this concept of shlichus. There's an interpretation that goes that whatever the shliach does, he is taking the place of the mishaleach. It is exactly as if the mishaleach is doing it. There is another explanation. It does not mean it's exactly as the mishaleach is doing it. The shliach is taka doing it. It's an act of the shliach. However, Torah has Torah has given this power that an act of one person can be credited to, as if the one that has sent him is doing it. But regardless, there are various interpretations in the concept of shlichus, but it all relates to the idea that what the shliach does has a shaychus to the mishaleach. We know in Torah there are exceptions. There's a concept that by a mitzvah shebegufay, a mitzvah which we are to do on our body, there is no idea of shlichus. For example, putting on tefillin. Putting on tefillin is something which we have to do it on our body, on our hands, and on our head. We have to put on tefillin daily. So we cannot say that I will appoint an emissary, I will appoint a shliach, that a shliach should do it for me. That's that we cannot say. But in other areas, there is this idea of shlichus, and as mentioned, various interpretations. To what extent the shliach relates to the mishaleach, or the mishaleach relates to the shliach, the act of shlichus rather, to what extent it relates to the mishaleach. But in any way, in any interpretation we will give, it still is the shliach is doing the act, whatever act he's fulfilling, whatever he's doing, whatever he's committing, he's doing it in behalf of the mishaleach. The Rebbe also referred again to the inyan which the Rebbe has brought to our attention the last few weeks, the importance of being makil kehilos b'Shabbos, of congregating on Shabbos, bringing together Yidden on Shabbos, and that the congregating should be to learn Torah. Though in various communities there will be various shiurim in Torah, but all these shiurim in Torah should be united by the fact that all the shiurim should learn at least a few minutes an inyan in Parshas HaShavua, an inyan that has a shaychus to the week's Sedra. And when we're talking about Parshas HaShavua, in this week's Parsha, we are learning about Yitzchak. And when Yitzchak got married, he was at the age of 40 years old. To the Akedah, he was 37. And 3 years later, Yitzchak was 40 years old. And this reminds us of the fact that this is the year of Shnas HaArboim. It's 40 years, as the Rebbe refers to it. It's 40 years since the Frierdiker Rebbe has passed away. In other words, it's 40 years of leadership of the Rebbe Zalgazun and we all know what the concept of Arboim is. Idea of Arboim is, as we find in the Torah, when Moshe Rabbeinu was talking to the Yidden in the 40th year before the Yidden entered Eretz Yisrael, Moshe Rabbeinu is bringing out to them that until now you did not have Leiv lo das ve'inayim lirois v'oznayim lishmoya. Until now you did not have a heart to understand and eyes to hear and eyes to see. And ears to hear. However, now, after 40 years, you will be reaching to a higher level of wisdom, to a higher level of understanding. And what it actually means is, this is the foundation for the concept which is stressed in Chazal, as Adar Boyim Shnin Koyim Inish Adaita Darabe. When a person reaches, after 40 years, that is when one can have an understanding, Koyim Inish Adaita Darabe, and the das of his Rebbe. This is said by Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu is telling this to Yidden, that now you have reached to 40 years. Memela, we can reach to, after being 40 years after going out of Mitzrayim, and 40 years after Matan Torah. So what Moshe Rabbeinu is really telling them, now you could first have an idea on the greatness of all of these inyanim. But the saying that Moshe Rabbeinu, there's the spark of Moshe Rabbeinu within every Jew. As we know what the Alter Rebbe tells us in Tanya. Mo Hashem Elokecha Shoyel Mi'imach. Pasuk, what is the Rebbe asking from you? All he's asking is that you should fear him. Ki'im li'yira Yisrael. So Chazal ask, what's the pshat? All you're asking is to fear him, or to yira milsa. Is the God-fearing something so small, so minute? You say all he's asking for is to be God-fearing. God-fearing is not something so simple. And the Gemara responds, Ein yet. Lagabi Moshe, when we're talking about Moshe, it's something small for him. For a madrega of Moshe Rabbeinu, it's milsa zutosi. So the Alter Rebbe in Tanya asks, the pasuk is addressed to every Yid, not only to Moshe Rabbeinu. And based on this, the Alter Rebbe brings out that every Yid has a spark of Moshe Rabbeinu within him. And for the spark of Moshe Rabbeinu, it is that it can fulfill this mission. Memela, the same thing here. The spark of Moshe Rabbeinu that is within each and every Jew reaches the level of, after 40 years, Leiv Ladas, V'inayim Lirois, Vaznayim Lishmoya, that we have a deeper understanding, we reach to a higher level, to a deeper level, to this level of Arboim Shnin, that by Arboim it is Koyim Inish Adaita Darabe, we reach to a much deeper and higher Madrege after 40 years. The Rebbe again referred to the Kinus, to the convention of Shluchim that's taking place. The Rebbe said that it would be appropriate that all Shluchim commemorate this convention, should take a picture together, and those that are here, not only the Shluchim, those that are here with their families should also be included in the picture, and then it remains something eternal, that even a child that has participated in it came along with his father, with his parents, can later point and identify himself that he also participated in this kinus. And it would also be appropriate, says the Rebbe, to give out a koivitz, to give out a publication which should contain in Yonim and Nigla and in Yonim Echsidis, which were said and were spoken at this kinus, and all of this should be published together, and this will be something which will put the kinus in a way that after many, many years we'll still be able to refer to this kinus, refer to this convention by referring to the picture, as well as by referring to the inyanim and Torah, which are written here and will be published here, which are all inyanim and Nigla and Echsidis, which will be said at this kinus.